Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the Quarantine Leadership Series, where I am here with a great, probably one of the one of the legendary CEOs in our movement, been around a long time and very well respected in the movement. But I'm here with Scott Goyer, CEO, YMCA of the Suncoast. I love that all the Ys in Florida have these creative names. So our YMCA, Scott, is halfway between Charlotte and Asheville, and that's going to be the name. We're the Y halfway between Charlotte and Asheville. So.
You know what? It would be a lot easier to describe that than the way the Ys in the Florida have decided to describe themselves. So yeah, Suncoast, who knows where the heck that is. So
again tonight, people, we're selling this kind of part two that we're sharing bourbon with friends tonight. And so Scott, tell everybody what you're drinking tonight.
So as I was telling Cam earlier, my youngest daughter moved out to Colorado Springs probably about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago now. And I'm always looking for different bourbons and that type of thing. And she ended up asking somebody for, like, I want to buy my dad a good bourbon for birthday, which is always a great thing when your daughter understands what would really make him a cool gift, right? So there is a local distillery in Colorado Springs, and it's called 291. Where they got the name, I really have any idea. They've got a really, pre-COVID, they had a really cool tour. And so I'm always at my house. I've always got at least a bottle of 291 at the house. So again, it's not bourbon. Obviously, they have to call it Colorado whiskey. But this is, I don't think, yeah, you can. This is it. This is it. Now, the difference in this one, this is called the Bad Guy. And the reason this is called the Bad Guy is because it's 123.3 proof. So this is hot. And so I'll always put a cube in it just because it's just drinking it straight is turpentine. So but it is my favorite, not favorite, but it is one I always have to have around.
Yeah. So the other reason he puts ice in it is show everybody your backdrop. Because if it burns too much, you'll be sweating too much.
This is kind of cruel, I understand. So one of the reasons why I will never leave Florida is this is the view from our townhome. Uh-oh, something just happened. Yeah. So that's the view from our townhome. And so that's, if I even thought about leaving, my wife would say, sure, you can go, but I will not be with you.
Right. So, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. I tell you, I told John Priest before he retired, I am the retirement fund's poster child because I have a mortgage till I'm 90 years old. So, you know.
You're going to keep working. So do you have that was a great, I love, bourbon lovers are easy to shop for Christmas.
Oh yeah.
And birthdays, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's maybe a nicest bourbon that you've acquired, or do you have a bourbon story?
I've got a few. So my whole bourbon, I was actually a tea holder for a long time. I have a chronic illness that really, drinking alcohol was supposedly not a problem, and I found out I could actually drink bourbon and not be a problem, so that became a problem. But yeah, my wife, when we moved last time, she goes, I think you have a brown water problem. She lines up all of what I have. But so we were at I think it was at that point in time going Metro South, and it was hosted by Lexington at that time,
Cotto.
Thank you. Was our host, and so we had a couple of bourbon tours, and one was Woodford Reserve, and I had not had bourbon before, so Woodford became my go-to for a long time. It still does.
Yeah.
Not fast forward to I think it was probably maybe of a YNAM meeting. It was hosted in Louisville, and it may have been a Metro South again, but it was hosted in Louisville, and Steve Tarver hosted it, and we had a event at Brown Forman. And Brown Forman is one of the big, distillers, and they carry a bunch of lines, and one of them is Old Forester. And I got to meet the distiller, the master distiller, and I just geeked on him. I don't geek on many people at all. I geeked on this guy. I was like, oh. And so we got into discussions, and he said, have you ever had Old Forester's birthday bourbon? And I had never heard of it before. And come to find out is every year they push out a bourbon that's 12-year-old bourbon, and it's a special release, and it is like 2013, 2014. So I finally acquired my first bottle of 2013 Old Forester birthday bourbon. Probably got it for probably $60 or $70, right? And then the next year came out and it started becoming more and more scarce. So I called Tarver up and I said, hey, Steve, can you get me a bottle? And he takes a picture of 2 bottles of 2014 birthday bourbon on his counter in his home during Christmas. And for all of us who've ever met Steve, we love him to death, but sometimes follow through is not his greatest character when it comes down to this kind of stuff. I mean, obviously he's a phenomenal CEO. I had the blessing to follow him here. But those kind of things, they're not that important. He's not a drinker either, so he doesn't have a clue. I mean, if he has one, pretty drink, he's pretty much done. But so he takes a picture, and come January, it's like, Steve, where'd that bottle go? And he went radio silent. No clue. I didn't hear from him for another 2 or 3 weeks. I finally busted him again. Hey, we're gonna get together for this meeting. Why don't you bring it with you or whatever? And he goes, Scott, I hate to admit this, I've lost the bottles. And I'm like, you lost 2 bottles of bourbon? How is it possible you lose 2 bottles of bourbon? You don't even drink a lot. He goes, I don't know, maybe got caught up on our Christmas stuff and all that kind of stuff. So sometime the September following, I get a box from Steve, and it's a 2015 birthday bourbon. And at this point in time, it's getting more and more rare. And now, and I got a 2017 because that's an Eric Mann story that I had called up. They found one. They were holding it for me. Eric said, no big deal. He goes and picks it up. And the woman said, no, we were holding that for an hour. This is going to be gone. And he goes, what do you mean? She goes, you don't understand what you were holding for your buddy. So my daughter ran out and got a bottle of 2017. Come to find out, on the secondary market now, a bottle of 2017 unopened Old Forester birthday bourbon's probably worth somewhere around $2,000 to $3,000.
You're kidding.
No. And so I've opened the 2013, I opened the 2015, not knowing what I was drinking when I was drinking it, And for my 60th birthday, which was in 19, my wife tried getting a bottle of 2019, couldn't find it, just could not find it anywhere. And so I just traded my 17 for a 19 and $100. So I got $100 and a bottle of 2019. So I've got that now. It will remain unopened for quite some time. So, but that's kind of my bourbon story.
That's great.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun one. So
Yeah,
throw 2 of my colleagues under the bus.
I like to drink it, and so I don't understand buying the bottles and not drinking.
I do have so I'm milking.
I would have opened. I would have opened and drank.
I know. I was really close. I was so close to opening to the 17 until I looked at it, and then I made the cardinal rule of mistakes. Right. I told my wife, and my level of excitement, that, hey, do you know how much that's worth? And that was just not a wise decision. So that one has remained unopened. The 2019 is unopened, but 15 and 13, I'm just milking it. And as friends come over as a special event, we'll pour a little bit out, and eventually it'll go away. But it's there.
Where else have you worked in your career? Give us the chronologically.
So, like you, I'm a second generation YMCA brat. I didn't spend a lot of time on the Y. My dad just chose not to. I mean, I don't blame him. We all have been there before. When we leave the Y, we don't necessarily want to go back. But and you got to wait. Pause this. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a gift from my son, which is Angel's Envy.
Oh,
so that was a birthday gift from my son.
That is in my opinion, that is the best drinking neat bourbon out there, that leaves you with because it's just enough of that port wine barrel that gets into that thing. That is, yeah. No, I love that one. That's
the palate, but I do like a little burn. I do like the burn sometimes, especially in the winter time. I like the burn.
You have winter? I have winter.
That's right.
Winter.
It was 70 here today in North Carolina.
Yeah, it was we got hot today. It was like 85 or whatever. So anyway,
your career.
Junior in high school, made a decision I was going to go into Y work. I really, so I went to Springfield College, where the men and men are sort of the women. Oh, you can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
But they had a YMCA program. And so did that for 2.5 years, tested out some classes, and did a student internship with the Hartford Y. at that time, and got that great opportunity to kind of explore a lot of different Y opportunities. And then took my first job in Cincinnati as a program director, youth program director, non-physical youth programming. So didn't do youth sports, did the gray Y, the very beginning of, our school age programs and that type of thing, teen
Good stuff.
clubs, yeah, all that fun stuff. And then I took a job starting a new Y in Cincinnati. I got the title of a branch exec, but it was a non-facility YMCA. We raised a little capital, built an outdoor pool, and then moved out to San Francisco. I was a operations officer of the Marin Y in San Francisco. Got a great experience there. At that same time, my father was still working for the Y, and he was actually in the San Francisco Y as their development officer. His claim to fame is that he ended up becoming an interim chief operating officer, and he turned me down for a raise. So that's he was always proud of himself. He turned me down. Yeah, right. And then went to Nashville, Tennessee, branch director of the Green Hills YMCA. Interesting enough, my dad left the San Francisco Y and joined the Nashville Y as the development officer for Nashville and Clark, and helped raise quite a millions of dollars there when they were there together. And then became the first MRC director of the South. And for those who were listening, this MRC was the Management Resource Center, and I know Cameron, but there's others. That was the arm of the YMCA USA that was a farmed out arm, if you will, of Y services. So all of Tennessee, part of Kentucky, part of West Virginia, had a Y in Indiana and a Y in Illinois. So we were spread out, a lot of windshield time. And at the same time, I managed a branch at the same time. So that was. Clark got a good deal. We got two people for the price of one. And then went to St. Paul, Minnesota to be the operations officer with Tom Brinsko there. And then in 2000 came down here to become the CEO. So I've been down here since 2000.
And
so
you just
long time.
You've had great leaders around you, though. I mean, that you've worked for. Those are great wives, great experiences. Yeah. I was fortunate enough early in my career. I went to a training in Nashville and met your father, and Lori Swan actually was leading this fundraising or development or marketing thing, and your dad came in and did a session, but always just heard he was just so well respected in our movement. So tell us a little bit about his leadership that's rubbed off on you. What did you glean from him? He listened amazingly well. And that's why he became a great development officer. And I don't listen so well, so I'm not a really good development officer. I don't know, Hank Bagelman at my father's retirement. My father had to retire early because at that point in time, he was diagnosed with a cancer that was going to be terminal. And so he had to retire early, probably way earlier than I wanted to, because at that point in time, if you died in service, you only got the death benefit. You did not get anything else. That was the late 90s. So for those who are listening who are in the retirement fund now, it's much better than it was then, believe it or not, from that standpoint. But anyway, so at his retirement party, Hank Bagelman, who used to work with in San Francisco, said that, I think this was probably true, that my father was the word genuine, it always came to mind when you think about my father. And I really do believe that was true. What you saw was what you get. And I have always prided myself, when I was doing some interviews, my wife would, they would pull her off the side and say, this is what you see is what you get. And those of you who know me, what you see is what you get. It is, it is who I am, and I don't necessarily. So I learned that a lot from him. And I think the other thing I learned from him is, there's no real. We do a lot of serious work in our world, but we've got to have fun doing it. And I really did learn a lot from him on just how to just enjoy life. He was an ordained minister prior, and never had a church, but he went to Bible college, and strong man of faith, and he obviously taught that to us as well. So, but yeah, I just, it's funny. George Ramel, many of you all know George. My father hired George. He was, and George oftentimes says that, you're looking more and more like your dad every day. And I said, no, it's just that I have wrinkles and I've got gray hair. There's not that much resemblance. That's good. So It wasn't a question I was going to prompt you on, but tell us about your faith. If your dad's an ordained minister, how's that affect your life now? Where are you in your faith?
Um, Growing continually, and I think that that's really cool. So probably I would have said that even through college and into my first couple of years in the Y, I was very kind of lukewarm. Went out to San Francisco, and it was easy to be very lukewarm out there. Cincinnati, well, it was kind of a Bible Beltish, but not that much. When we had our children is when I talked to my wife. And my wife was not a believer at the time that we were married, and I said, I want to be raising our children in a church. And so she was willing to come, and she was I would say she was the perfect epitome of a seeker. And her story to Christ is actually one that I can't tell without crying. So we won't do that right now.
Awesome.
But and at age 40, some odd, maybe 40 or 41, when she was baptized. I got here and I started feeling tugged that I need to learn more. I felt really uncomfortable as a branch director since I had to lead devotions, and every young program director probably goes through that same thing because they don't even know where they are in their faith all the time. And it's just, but since I've been here, my faith has been growing. I'm in 2 Bible studies that really help. But if we get deep into this, I think one of the things that I could argue that the world and our society and our community needs the why more as the why of old, of something that's rooted and grounded, and not afraid of talking about the fact that there is a C in our organization, but we also have to be very careful. And I promise myself that I'm going to live that. I'll try the best I can. I fall short every single hour, but I think from the standpoint of our way in the communities, we can't be heavy-handed on it, but we also can't, in my mind, I don't believe we should be apologetic either.
No, and I've always appreciated you. We need our larger Y CEOs to speak that voice, and you always have. And there's several. Clark was, Calhoun. There were just some great faith-based leaders. Tim Joyce in Richmond. Just that just really had a heart. Doug McMillan and Raleigh. We're blessed.
Eric Ellsworth, and the Carolinas, you guys have got a very strong base. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Eric, you're right, Eric.
And he came out of Carolina.
Yeah. But I appreciate it. Appreciate that and that leadership style there. So the world's changed in your long career. Maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, how has your leadership changed as the CEO?
I've always been a pretty inclusive CEO. I've always jokingly said, if we're going down as a group. I'm not going down by myself. And I get clearly that, I oftentimes says that I have a crown, and I physically sometimes will say, all right, I'm putting the crown on because we've talked about this till we're done, and I've got to make a decision at some point, right? But you always hear people talk about, the best advice I ever got, and this came from Bob Hoffman, who was the operations officer of the Hartford Y, Joanna Hoffman's dad. He said, hire the best people you can and just let them and just get out of their way. And I think that's true. And true to that, try and hire people who are better than you are, right? So I've always made an attempt to do that. I think the last 2 years, COVID probably taught us. I'm not a high-end risk taker. I know it's just not part of my nature. That's probably why I'm a salaried employee, right? So I don't have that, entrepreneur. I have entrepreneurial spirit with a backstop, right?
That's right.
But I think that we were always a ready, aim again organization. I jokingly said we didn't have the ability or the luxury to make a mistake, right? And I think what COVID taught us is don't let the adage we're using now is don't let perfection get in the way of action, because you can always go back and change things. And we never ever had that. We wanted it so perfect all the time before, and so we roll it out. And so we were working on an online presence, for fitness for 2 years. And then during COVID, in 30 days, we had an online presence. Wasn't pretty, wasn't great, but we had a presence. And it was like, why didn't we do this 2 years ago? You know, so I think that's that. Um, I continue to appreciate, I have a very mature staff. When I say mature, my chief operating officer, Tom Brinsko, has been with us for 6 years. He's the, other than my development officer, he's the youngest tenured staff member of the YMCA of Suncoast and on my leadership team. I have people who've been with us for 20, 25 years. So letting them, you know, mature in their jobs and watching them and guiding them. And I'm a very hands-off kind of, but I also want to know. So that's my, I'm kind of got an oxymoron. I really want to be involved. That's why I love the size of my Y. And I don't think I could run a mega Y just because I really want to get, I want to be involved in some of those decisions.
Are you connected with the aquatics director at one of your branches?
They know me, I know them. But when I say connected, one of the things we've done recently, actually pre-COVID, we were doing it. I purposely did this. I don't know where I was, but I heard about it. Some listening sessions, and literally we'll sit down. The first group I sat down with were the the millennials, and said, hey, talk to us. What, you know, it was just very open. And the second time we got together, it was a much more open conversation. I mean, they were just literally, why is it this way? What's happening? Or, you know, that kind of stuff, which is what I really like. We sat down with 17 and 18-year-olds, say, why are you part of the Y? We sat down with 60 plus people, all look like me, why you stay with the Y, or why you, you know, and also now with Hispanic and then Black staff teams, what's, you know, what's their perception of us? So
that's great. I think we got to do that more. I was listening to an old podcast, and it was the past Home Depot, and I forget the term he used, but it was dinners with just store, you know, without the managers around. He just went and had dinners with them, and I thought, man, that's a great idea. We need to do it more.
Yeah,
have that listening.
It was intimidating. Yeah, it kind of was. I think for some of our staff originally might have been intimidating from a branch structure, and I obviously the young staff sitting down with me until they realized who they're sitting down with, you know. And that's the other thing is that, you know, I've said even all of our orientations that, you know, hey, we all have jobs to do. There's many times your job is so much more important than my job. You know, I have the title, but boy, you know, when you're a lifeguard, your job is a hell of a lot more important than mine is.
Well, Scott, I appreciate your time, your leadership. Yep. He is a great man of faith. The reason I've had a hard time scheduling him is I'm trying to schedule him on his Bible study night. So, I do. There's one good thing about my Bible study, then we can move on. Our Bible study is called Cigars, Booze, and Hallelujah. Did I tell you that one? No, yeah. Eric Mann told me that was your Bible study group.
Yeah. So I got invited there, but some of my board members, some other people, they're all like-minded, and we all bring a bottle of wine. We don't always finish the bottle of wine, thank God, because we got to drive home. And then for those of us, I've reduced my cigar smoking. My cardiologist says it would probably be better if I reduced it. And after 3 stints, I'm going to start listening to him, I think. And Hallelujah. So it's cigars, booze, and Hallelujah. Sit around, smoke cigars, read the Bible, and drink wine.
I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the DNA, you know, living it too. You know, I'm proud of my father, and you know, probably deep down, I don't want to tell him, but I'm doing this somewhat to please him, you know, somewhat. I started at 14 years old too, you know, doing flag football and some things. So yeah, I appreciate your leadership and love your bourbon stories. And for everybody watching, I hope to see you soon. And remember to always lead with love. Thank you.
Okay, thanks man. Nice job.